Greetings and salutations. My name is Charles, and this is the 831 Journey. Today we're taking a look at the passage Philippians 1, verses 9 through 11. And right now we're just going to do basic observation of the text. And so what we mean by that is with observation, it in some ways is simply what it means. We're going to take a look at the text and see what the text says. And so we'll read it carefully. We'll read it thoroughly. We'll read it multiple times. We may have questions along the way, and I've got a space set up for making some notes about questions that may arise. But ultimately, I'm trying to read the text and in some ways not miss anything that I might accidentally gloss over, skip past, or make assumptions about. And so we're going to read carefully and we're going to make notes accordingly on the observations that we see. And so we'll read the text starting in verse 9. It says, "And it is my prayer that your love may abound more and more with knowledge and all discernment, so that you may approve what is excellent, and so be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ, to the praise and to the glory and praise of God." And so that's 3 verses. But as I look at it, the first thing that I noticed, even as I was reading, is effectively that this is all one statement here, with no real breaks along the way. So what we're looking at, everything's going to be tied together, it looks like. I mean, it is worth bearing in mind that a English translation is doing the best it can to reflect what they think the punctuation as it would be in the Greek, what like that would be, but there was no punctuation in the Greek manuscripts. So this is our best attempt at kind of piecing together it. That's not to say that it's a guess. There's good reasons behind the way we think through sentences, statements, etc., and the punctuation that the translators use. But while we make an observation of it in the English text, we will hold it somewhat open-handedly. So the first thing I notice is that this is a continuation of the idea that came before this passage. And the reason I know that is verse 9 starts with "and," which reflects a continuation from what came before. And so we're going to have to keep that in mind in terms of understanding the passage. Part of it, I mean, and this goes to understanding any passage, is reading the context, but all the more given the fact that Paul starts verse 9 with "and," is a clue to us that we must take into account the rest of the passage and the rest of the context around it if we're going to understand what is meant in verses 9 through 11. And so continuing on, it is my prayer that your love may abound more and more. That's kind of the first clause looking at. So Paul is praying for their love to grow, specifically to abound, and not merely abound, but do so with increasing amounts, intensity, etc. Now, where am I getting this idea from? So, I mean, part of it is just simply seeing that he says, "It is my prayer that your love may abound." Like that's literally what it says. He's praying that their love would grow, or specifically to abound. But then he qualifies abound, which is kind of already this idea, just basic understanding of the word abound, of kind of an expansive growth. But then he qualifies it with more and more. So it's like, it's not even that I want it to grow. It's like, I want it to grow a lot in increasing amounts, increasing perhaps intensity. That's a question or thing to continue to look at when getting to the interpretation phase of the passage and its study. But it's not merely that their love may abound, but that it's a continual growth kind of thing is what it looks like he's trying to say there. So at the same time, it's interesting that his prayer is that it may abound. So Paul's prayer is that their love may abound, indicating there is the possibility that it could not. May the term would be that there's something subjective about it, or that it's uncertain. If we say our favorite team may make it into the playoffs, we're not saying that they're gonna be in the playoffs. It's saying it's possible they could be in the playoffs, but not guaranteed. And in the same way, for Paul to say that their love may abound more and more, it's potentially pointing to the idea that there's the possibility that it couldn't, and he wants it to then do so. In that case, it's his prayer that that would be the case. At the same time, it's interesting that it's specifically Paul's prayer. And we could draw this in contrast with the church as a whole, or Paul's various companions with him. Now, there may not be much to make of this, but I still want to kind of pay attention to as much as I can with all of this. In fact, the fact that Paul says it is his prayer indicates that this is not simply a past thing or a future thing. That their love may abound is a present prayer of Paul's. So it's a present prayer, not merely one that's future or past, that their love may abound. And at the same time, if we're thinking about, the fact that it was specifically Paul's prayer, specifically Paul is concerned about the love of the church in Philippi as well. He's concerned about their love, your love, specifically, not the love of the churches as a whole or anything, but this is a personal prayer from Paul to these believers in Philippi, that he wants them to understand that it is personal to them. Now, as we look going on, and that's kind of just some basic stuff for this first clause, where Paul says, "It is my prayer that your love may abound more and more." And as we go forward, we see this next kind of phrase, "with knowledge and all discernment." And so it could be, well, thinking about it, looking at how it goes, the question could be asked of this, and we can make a note over here where I've got my additional kind of question section here, separate note. It's what's indicated by this little guy here in Logos. Does with knowledge and discernment modify love or abound? And that may seem like, well, surely it means love, but I don't want to assume necessarily at this stage anything. So if there's two possibilities, I want to entertain the fact that there are two possibilities for something. So it could be that the love is what should abound and should have knowledge and all discernment, or it could be that the way that the love abounds is with knowledge and all discernment. That is to say that perhaps it's their expressions of love, or the way that they're thinking about how they feel a sense of love, or act upon that love as it abounds and grows, and perhaps, like, their actions reflecting love increase, that maybe how that increase goes about is what should be marked with knowledge and discernment. Or it could be that it's the love itself as it grows, that love should be characterized by knowledge and all discernment. And to be fair, there is a sense in which this may be a little bit of a distinction without difference, is that we're calling two different things out here in a way and saying, hey, here's two different things that are really not that different. But at the same time, again, at this early stage of study, it's important to keep all these kind of questions in mind, because where I get in trouble is if I jump to conclusions too early and I miss what is actually the correct way of interpreting it, a given passage, because I jump to a different interpretation straight out the gate and never even entertain the possibility there might be a different one. So where I recognize the possibility for multiple interpretations, I want to, at this early stage, bear the possibility in mind, so that I don't make an early mistake. So again, thinking about my observation, I would maybe even say that either their love or the way it abounds should be marked by knowledge, all discernment. And it is interesting too here that Paul specifically modifies discernment with all, rather than also modifying knowledge with all as well. May not be much to make of that, but it is interesting to see that and to at least make a note of it as something that's worth considering, paying attention to, etc. So that's verse 9 outright. Those are just several observations. I'm not saying that that's all the observations that could be made, but in a quick run through, in an effort to be thorough, and this is not to preclude circling back on it here in a minute if need be, but for verse 9, and it is my prayer that your love may abound more and more with knowledge and all discernment. That's the notes I've got right now so far for observation. And so we come to verse 10, and interestingly, we get a so that phrase. So interestingly, verse 10 is a continuation of the thought from verse 9, with the so that phrase pointing to a conclusion or purpose from what was said before. So when we have a so that, it's saying that, hey, this thing that was there before, it is there for the purpose of, or to get the result of, what then will follow. So you'll have idea, so that, result, purpose, etc. And so what is that purpose? He continues on to say that you, the purpose or result of we can even just say Paul's prayer for their growing love, is that the believers in Philippi may approve what is excellent. Once again, it's possible that otherwise they may not approve what is excellent. Again, we're thinking about that word may. So he's wanting them to then potentially be able to approve what is excellent. So right off the bat, another question that comes to mind is, what does Paul have in mind when he thinks about what is excellent? Because if he's wanting Philippian believers to approve what is excellent, and this is thinking about the passage and a potential interpretation and application for today. It's not crazy to think that if he wants Philippian believers to approve what is excellent, Paul might have in mind that if he were here today, he might want us all to approve what is excellent as well. And so, to that end, we would need to know what is excellent. But that also may tie into what he's looking at here, because, part of what he wants them to have is knowledge and discernment, and that may tie into what is, in his mind, what is excellent. So he wants them to approve what is excellent, and there's a continuation of this idea with the idea that it is then continuation of the idea of approving what is excellent is that one then and so may be pure and blameless for the day of Christ. And so there's a continuation that's it's really kind of almost two conclusion type statements. There's verse 9, Paul's praying that their love may abound more and more with knowledge and all discernment, for the purpose of them being able to approve what is excellent, and correlated with that is the ability to approve what is excellent will be associated with or followed by being pure and blameless. This pure and blameless state is for the day of Christ. Which, of course, begs the question, invites the question, what does Paul mean by the day of Christ? That's verse 10. Let's see, make sure we're not missing any ideas. You may approve what is excellent, so be pure and blameless. Honestly, part of me kind of wants to ask the question, what is the difference between being pure and blameless? I'm curious if any of y'all had that same question, because in some ways you think about being pure and being blameless, they seem almost synonymous. So in some ways, the fact that Paul would say both does raise the interesting question of why does he have some distinction that he would make between them? So another good question to consider and have ready to look at later. So getting on to verse 11, even here, it looks like a continuation of verse 10. So be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, comma, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ. And so it almost seems like associated with being pure and blameless is being filled with the fruit of righteousness. The fruit of righteousness comes through Jesus Christ. Pretty straightforward. With the fruit of righteousness, where does the fruit of righteousness come? That comes through Jesus Christ. How? And then, this invites the question, how does the fruit of righteousness come through Jesus Christ, or why through rather than from? It's a fair question. Like, what is meant by through Jesus Christ as opposed to righteousness from Jesus Christ? And so that would be a question to, again, take a look at. And it would seem that as Paul concludes all this, the ultimate purpose of all of this is that it may be to the glory and praise of God. Though at the same time, it's possible that to the glory and praise of God is modifying the fact that the righteousness is coming through Jesus Christ. That is to say that it is possible that in some ways to the glory and praise of God is summarizing everything here, that Paul is praying their love may abound more and more to the glory and praise of God, with all knowledge and discernment to the glory and praise of God, so that you may approve what is excellent to the glory and praise of God. So be pure and blameless for the day of Christ to the glory of God. And you get the idea. Or it could be that they are then pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ, that coming through Jesus Christ being to the praise and glory of God. That is, that they have the fruit of righteousness. It's coming from Christ, so that the fact they have the fruit of righteousness is to the glory and praise of God. Again, possibly distinctions without difference, but it's, again, another question that's worth noting is to the glory and praise of God, modifying all three verses, or just the idea that the fruit of righteousness is coming through Jesus Christ. So that's a quick rundown. I realize this is all of like 20-25 minutes or so of observations of the passage. I'm fully expecting that there are observations I may have missed, so feel free to put them down in the comments below. If I've got something kind of backwards or something, put them in the comments below. I'm going to qualify all of this with the fact that I have not done any pre-work on this, so you're seeing literally my thought process as I go, and that is actually by design, because part of the idea here is I want to just kind of put the process in front of you, the viewer, and let you see how I'm thinking through this. And I realize that there may be some leaps or steps that I took that I didn't do a good job of explaining, and even that I'm open to the feedback on it, because the whole idea is I want to get better at this and I want to make this a useful tool. So if there's a way that I can do this work better, or show my work better, or make this more helpful for any of you who are wanting to better understand how to study the Bible, please leave those in the comments below. If this is helpful and you think that it could be helpful to others, hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe to the channel, as I hopefully will be working through more of this stuff. But that so far is the first step here in studying this passage, these three verses, Philippians 1, 9 through 11. Next, we'll be continuing to break down the passage and think about how it's arranged as we work through observation a little bit further, and set ourselves up for good interpretation. So that's it for this. And again, if there's any thoughts or additional questions, put them in the comments below. And otherwise, I will catch you on the next one.